The town of Blackwood didn't just break Arthur Pendelton's spirit, they erased 40 years of his life in a single afternoon. If you drove past the rusted iron gates of Oak Creek Farm today, you'd just see an overgrown field of weeds and a collapsed porch. But 3 years ago, this was the heart of the county. Arthur was a man whose word was better than a signed contract. He was the kind of farmer who left extra crates of sweet corn on his roadside stand for families he knew were struggling, trusting them to pay when they could. He was a quiet pillar of the community. Yet, within 48 hours, he became the most hated man in the state. People threw rocks through his front windows. His own neighbors spat on the ground when his truck passed by. And leading the entire crusade was Sheriff Thomas Vance, a man with a gleaming silver badge, a perfectly pressed uniform, and a secret that was rotting him from the inside out. Sheriff Vance didn't just arrest Arthur, he systematically dismantled the old man's reputation until there was absolutely nothing left. But what the sheriff forgot is that the earth doesn't hide secrets forever. In a small town, the truth has a way of growing right through the asphalt, and when it finally broke into the light, it didn't just clear Arthur's name, it completely destroyed the entire power structure of Blackwood. Welcome back, everyone. If you're new here, grab a seat because tonight's story is one of the most emotional ones we've ever told. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from today? Which country do you call home? Drop it in the comments. I love seeing how far this little community reaches. Tonight's story is about pride, cruelty. The nightmare began on a scorching Tuesday in July. Arthur was out in the north pasture, fixing a broken barbed wire fence, when 3 department cruisers tore down his gravel driveway, kicking up a massive cloud of white dust. Sheriff Vance stepped out of the lead vehicle, his mirrored sunglasses reflecting the harsh midday sun. He didn't greet Arthur with the usual neighborly nod. Instead, he unholstered his sidearm and ordered the 65-year-old farmer to hit the ground. Arthur, confused and clutching a pair of rusty wire cutters, slowly knelt in the dirt. Within minutes, deputies were tearing through his pristine barn, throwing over feed sacks, smashing antique wooden crates, and ripping up floorboards. Arthur kept asking what was happening, but Vance only offered a cold, smug smile. "It's over, Artie," Vance whispered, leaning down close. "We know what you've been doing out here." Less than an hour later, the local news station received an anonymous tip directly from the department. By the evening broadcast, Arthur's face was splashed across every television screen in the county. The allegation was monstrous. Sheriff Vance claimed they had uncovered a massive, sophisticated illegal smuggling ring operating right out of Arthur's isolated north barn. They claimed to have found crates of stolen heavy machinery and illicit contraband hidden beneath the hay. The fallout was instantaneous and brutal. In a town of less than 5,000 people, an accusation from the sheriff was as good as a conviction. Arthur's phone rang off the hook with death threats. The local co-op, where he had bought his seed for decades, canceled his credit line overnight. When he went to the grocery store to buy milk, the cashier refused to touch his money, throwing his change on the counter with utter disgust. Arthur tried to tell anyone who would listen that he was innocent, that he had never seen those crates in his life. And that the north barn door was always unlocked because he trusted people. But nobody wanted to listen to an old man when they could listen to a heroic sheriff who had supposedly just cleaned up the county's biggest crime wave. Sheriff Vance gave press conferences twice a week, standing proudly behind microphones, basking in the local media praise, and dropping subtle hints that Arthur had been ruining the town for years. Arthur's health began to rapidly deteriorate. The stress wore him down to a shadow, his hands shook constantly, and he stopped sleeping, watching the road from his dark kitchen window, terrified that someone would burn his house down. He was completely isolated, trapped in a prison made entirely of public hatred. Vance had successfully turned the entire world against him, securing his own upcoming re-election as the untouchable protector of Blackwood. But Vance made one fatal mistake: he assumed Arthur was completely alone. He didn't account for David, Arthur's estranged nephew, an investigative journalist who had just arrived in town with a camera, a notebook, and a burning suspicion that the sheriff's timeline didn't add up at all. But David wasn't just looking for a family story, he was looking for the precise moment the trap was snapped shut. As he dug through the sheriff's official evidence logs, a massive logical gap emerged. The heavy machinery Vance claimed to have seized from Arthur's barn was incredibly specific, industrial-grade equipment. David knew there was absolutely no way an elderly, independent farmer could transport, let alone sell, items of that scale without a massive paper trail. Yet, Arthur's bank accounts were entirely empty. So, where was the money going? And more importantly, who actually owned the trucks that moved those crates onto Oak Creek Farm in the dead of night? David realized that if he could track down the security footage from the highway intersection just 2 miles south of the farm, he would find the real culprits. But when he went to request those files, he discovered they had been completely wiped from the county server on the exact morning of Arthur's arrest. Someone with high-level administrative access had intentionally deleted the only proof of who really delivered that contraband. David knew right then that he wasn't just dealing with a corrupt arrest, he was looking at a massive, multi-million-dollar cover-up that went straight to the top of the county layout. If he could find the physical backup drives, he could blow the entire conspiracy wide open, but doing so meant breaking into the old records facility right under the deputies' noses. What would you do if your entire community turned its back on you for a crime you didn't commit? Let me know in the comments below if you think Arthur should have packed up and left, or stayed to fight. If you're completely hooked on how this truth finally comes to light, make sure to hit that like button right now. It really helps us bring more of these incredible, untold stories to life. The stakes were higher than they had ever been for Arthur's survival. To see exactly how David uncovers the final, undeniable piece of evidence that sends the sheriff to a federal prison, make sure you are fully subscribed to the channel with notifications turned on. You absolutely do not want to miss the shocking conclusion of this investigation in our very next video, where we drop the actual audio recordings that brought an entire corrupt police force to its knees. Click that subscribe button right now, stay tuned.